Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of the Digital Relics podcast, where we share our takes every week on games, movies, music, technology, and politics. I'm your host, Jason Stieber, and I'm joined today by my good friends Nick Sandelsky.
Hi.
And Joshua Greenwood.
Hello.
So, just to kind of explain the reason that we decided to start doing this podcast, first of all, we're just three regular guys. We're not involved in the industry at all. We don't get invited to early screenings of movies. We don't get beta versions of games. We're just three guys in the Midwest who feel like we have a little bit of a unique take on the industry and politics and technology in general. So we thought it would be fun to start this podcast.
We are completely unqualified to give you any information that you were about to hear. So that means you should really listen to us about what we're going to talk about. So yes, yeah.
So yeah, just to give a little bit of a brief background on who each of us are. As I said, my name is Jason. I've been into gaming for as long as I can remember. The first console I got was a Nintendo Entertainment System from my dad when I was 5 or 6 years old. My favorite game then was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Since then, I moved on. I'm more into PC gaming as well as PlayStation. I like to play first-person shooters. I'm a big Overwatch fan, and I'm really into technology.
Great. Okay, so hi everybody again. This is Nick talking to you. So yeah, I'm really into technology as well. I grew up loving technology. My first home console was the Nintendo NES. I'll still never forget opening that for Christmas when I was just a child and playing Mario Bros. I've owned every single Nintendo system up to the Wii U, and I've had extremely memorable experiences with every console. Oh shit, I'm fucking up. And I would say my favorite game that I've ever played is Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. That game is really what inspired me to love games and to
make love to games.
Make love to games. Right. And if you get an insider access, you might see that actually play out. But yeah, otherwise I love music. I have a wide range of musical tastes, from classical to electronic to alternative rock. I love movies. I don't get to watch as many movies as my fellow correspondents here, but I love science fiction. So that's usually, if we're talking about movies, that's probably what I'm going to bring up. And politics. That's another part of this podcast that I'm really excited to talk about. And I consider myself a moderate. And I try to stay level-headed, but sometimes I get a little lopsided. So if you get frustrated with me, just bear with me and give me a chance to make my point. Thanks.
Josh?
Hi, everybody. I'm Josh, as my counterpart acknowledged. I am the least qualified person to talk about technology in this room, so I won't mention that, but I do like technology. I guess I like having a toilet. I guess that's considered technology in some certain industries, but I like movies. That's my biggest thing. I spend a lot of time watching movies, and
I don't know anybody more unqualified, to talk about movies than you, Josh.
I also like video games. I'm the Xbox player in this group, just more by design of my current economic status. But the first video game system I can remember owning is a PlayStation, and the first video game I can remember playing is Resident Evil. And I've always been a huge fan of horror films. It's actually kind of my favorite genre because I think anything can happen in a horror film. I like politics. I like to debate. And I like to talk. I think a lot of people like to talk, but I don't think a lot of people like to talk when it comes and make sense when they talk. So hopefully this podcast will make sense.
Yeah, talking about politics a little bit. We don't assume that we're right. these are just our opinions, and that we try to back up with fact. So just remember that when you listen to this podcast, it's like, oh yeah, those guys have no idea what they're talking about. I do not agree with them. That's totally fine. So just something to think about.
We are in full agreement that we don't know what we're talking about. So again, we're not a part of any industry. We're not experts on politics. We're just three dudes. I think it's important to note that a direction we really took with this podcast is try to be a little bit of a voice of optimism in a world that's full of pessimism right now. So we're just looking to really have fun and get some laughs and, bounce some ideas off of each other and hopefully have a good time. So that's kind of the whole idea.
Exactly.
I agree.
So, how has your week been, gentlemen?
Good. I watched a few documentaries this week on HBO. I watched an amazing movie with Josh on Friday.
I'm happy how you liked that movie. I didn't think you were gonna. I wasn't sure if you were gonna like it or not.
The name of the movie is Funny Games.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
No.
Okay.
Is it?
Yeah,
the name of it? Yes. And
is that with Naomi Watts?
And
strong female lead Naomi Watts and a strong male lead and Michael Pitt.
Right.
Okay.
And Tim Roth is also in it. He's another strong male lead. So.
Right, and and that was I was shocked by.
It was legitimately good. You're not being sarcastic.
Yeah, it was legitimately good, and it makes you really think about different alternative universes, actually, which is kind of bizarre to a bizarre idea that you would get from a movie towards the end of it, especially when you consider what was in the first 5/6 of the movie. But
is it actually considered a sci-fi, or is it more
no, it's not.
It's more like psychological.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of. I mean, it's not a violent. Well, it is violent, but it's not like gruesomely violent or like blood and guts. But it also has I think another thing that you should talk about when you think about that movie is like, in a world where we're all so close together, that we can be so far apart, because it kind of like broaches the idea of privacy and how much privacy we actually really have, and how privacy in some instances can be dangerous. Mm-hmm. So.
Sounds like it might be a little bit ahead of its time as far as privacy goes.
It's a remake of an older film. The movie came out in 2007. It's a remake of a Dutch film. And I think it was a big... Naomi Watts was really into that project. I think she was the executive producer. So, but worth checking out. So,
I guess that could be the unofficial movie of the week. Funny Games. Check it out.
That's the American version, obviously.
Right, the American version.
So I don't know if you guys follow the DC cinematic universe at all, with Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, as well as Suicide Squad. Both cinematic classics. I'm being sarcastic. I don't like either of those movies. Alongside many reports over the last few months that the next Batman film, titled The Batman, was going through a lot of problems in the writing department. News came out this week that Ben Affleck, who was originally cited to direct the movie, has actually backed out and will no longer direct. He's actually only going to be in an acting role of Batman himself. I thought that was very interesting. I think the way the DC cinematic universe is going already, I think that they should probably just start over and try again, because it's been terrible so far. Wonder Woman, in my opinion, does not look good at all either. But so this is just further negative news towards the movie. I don't know if you guys have seen Batman vs. Superman or Suicide Squad.
I've seen both.
I have watched Batman vs. Superman, and that was a horrible experience. That's my opinion.
You went to the theater for that one.
I did, yeah. I did go to the theater. I took my dad, and it was just so disjointed. Nothing made sense. The scenes did not flow together well. It felt like there was a movie hidden somewhere else, and they just took screenshots of it, and then just put them in motion on the screen, and just put some voices in there. And it was Yeah, so
Well, I will say that I didn't see the movie in theaters. I waited until it came to home video and I was able to watch the extended edition, which seemed to have cleaned up a few of the issues that you're talking about as far as the flow of the film and maybe scenes that don't make sense. Because I would say that it actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be when I finally saw it, but it was in no way a good movie.
didn't you see the director's cut?
Yes,
You did,
the
yeah.
extended edition director's cut.
Okay, yeah.
I'll warn that there's a small spoiler here. Actually, it's a pretty large spoiler, but the scene that kind of wrecked the whole movie for me was the Martha scene, where Batman's about to kill Superman in their big epic fight on the end, and randomly Superman just says, "Martha!" And Batman's like, "Oh shit, my mom's name is Martha too. Like, are we best friends now?" And it was like Step Brothers, Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly, like, yes. And that was it. It was really unconvincing. I understand the concept of the idea that because Superman has a mother named Martha, the same way Batman has a mother named Martha, that they can relate to each other and it humanizes Superman so that Batman can see that maybe he's not this alien that can't relate to the human race at all. Like, I get the whole point of it, but the way it was directed and acted and just every part of it, it was not convincing in the slightest, and I thought it kind of ruined the whole movie from then on. So really bad scene. And then as I went on to see Suicide Squad, I just thought that movie was a gigantic piece of shit from beginning to end. It had no redeeming qualities. It felt like a movie that was written in the 90s the way that it objectified women. The costume design on a lot of the characters was really poor. And I thought the relationship between Joker and Harley Quinn, which, yes, I understand that it is supposed to be an unhealthy relationship, it was really glorified and glamorized and made to be sexy and beautiful. And you've already seen many teens and young girls and boys dressing up for Halloween and other things like that as Joker and Harley. And that is not...
I was just going to say that. It's a boon for the...
That is not the type of relationship that people should be seeking out or admiring. And I think that's... The movie went the totally wrong direction with that. And Jared Leto just fucking sucked. He was nothing compared to Heath Ledger.
I wanted to interject on that. That was probably my biggest anger when it came to that movie. His character just didn't make any sense. Everything he did made no sense to me at all. And you think about Joker. Yeah, Joker's insane, but he's also methodical and he knows what he's trying to do. Everything he does, in the comic books, he knows what the outcome's going to be. Jared Leto's character was more like, I'm just going to do crazy, wacky shit, and that's going to make me this cool character, It's like, I'm going to paint my face. That makes me scary.
Yeah, for a film that was centered around DC villains, I felt like whoever wrote the movie really just didn't have a grasp on what it means to be Joker, which is really surprising. And I'm not saying I know what it means to be Joker, but it doesn't mean having a tattoo that says damaged on your forehead. That's not the Joker. It felt like a really bad Joker cosplay more than anything. So yeah, just to continue, I'm not excited about the rest of the DC Universe movies. Suicide Squad really killed my excitement for any future of this universe, and I really do think that they should just start over.
What is your opinion on the Batman then? Because when I talk to people outside of this group here, a lot of people have issues with Ben Affleck as Batman. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, he was like one of the few bright spots in the movie, I thought.
I agree.
I think Ben Affleck's a really good actor. I think I know many will disagree with me, but I actually think that he was a better Batman than Christian Bale. I think Christian Bale was a better Bruce Wayne. I think Christian Bale's voice was a little over the top as Batman. And I thought Ben Affleck's take on Batman was burly and big and tough and scary. And I thought the way they did the fight scenes with him were really scary too. And there were some positives that you could definitely pull out of Batman versus Superman despite its flaws. And I think Ben Affleck was one of those positives. So when we talk about his movie, The Batman, that's coming out, I think it's next year, I did have some tepid optimism about it prior to this news of him backing out as a writer. What he kept harping on when there was rumors about issues with the writing process was that there's nothing wrong with the movie. It's just that he wants the movie to be perfect and he doesn't want to direct a film that doesn't have a great script and that isn't written really well. So after he says things like that and then he goes on to back out of the film as a director, it's just not a glowing endorsement of what the film's going to end up being. That, and then you mix that with the Wonder Woman trailers, which I think have been really subpar, and I just don't have any excitement for the future of this franchise.
So Ben Affleck's role in Superman versus Batman, he directed.
No, that was directed by Zack Snyder,
Snyder,
who also did Batman versus Superman, and he also did what's that? Dawn of the Dead remake.
Yeah.
Oh, he did do that? I didn't know that.
And he did 300, and he did Watchmen. So
He did the second 300 too, or no?
he did not do the second 300 movie. I don't know. I'm pretty mixed on Zack Snyder in general. I used to be a bigger fan of him than I am now.
I think he's overrated.
He's gone mainstream.
Yeah, really since Man of Steel and this Batman versus Superman, and then he also did I forget what it's called. It's like a bunch of girls in an insane asylum, and it's like really fantasy based, and they like fight all these huge machines and stuff. That movie sucked too. And then he did that too, so that makes
You can't remember the name of the movie. Obviously, it's not that good.
I know what you're referring to. I can't even think of the name myself.
Yeah, so that's 3 bad films in a row, and he's pretty much stuck in the DC cinematic universe for the next decade now. So my expectations aren't high for him.
Yeah, so it's been a good week.
Yeah, a really good week. Some gaming news. The PS4 is coming out with a new firmware update entitled Firmware Update 4.5. 2 interesting developments. First of all, it adds external hard drive support, which is something that's been lacking on the PS4 since its inception. Something
They're
that people have been
finally
clamoring
getting
for.
that.
Yes, they're finally getting
Yeah,
that. So the PS4 is always you've always been able to upgrade its internal hard drive, so you can add more storage. But now you can finally do USB storage, so it makes it a little simpler. It's a positive. It's a good thing. But the big news is that they are actually have added what they call a boost mode to the PS4 Pro. If you're not familiar with what the PS4 Pro is, it's essentially a 4K version of the PS4. It's got it's about 2.5 times faster than the PS4, but the speed increases would only be available on games that were specifically coded to take advantage of it, which the vast majority of games aren't right now. This new update adds a boost mode, which essentially makes it so original PS4 games don't require any special coding to be able to take advantage of the speed increases. So what we're looking at now is every single game that's ever come out for PS4 should see some type of a benefit on PS4 Pro. It's pretty big news. There's been testing done with several games, Bloodborne, other games with frame rate issues, and they go from having frame rate issues to having a solid 30 frames a second, and some games that are 30 frames a second are seeing boosts up to 45, 50, 60 frames a second. So it's a pretty interesting development.
I wonder what Microsoft is thinking about that news, considering that Project Scorpio, which was going to be released next year.
It was supposed to be released. Last word we've had, which was at E3 of last year, was that Scorpio was supposed to be released at the end of this year. There hasn't been any word since then about it.
Yeah.
And some speculation has suggested that Microsoft is watching very closely the way Sony is approaching the PS4 Pro and the success that Sony's found with the PS4 Pro, which seems to be actually pretty limited success. It hasn't been a doorbuster exactly. So some speculation is already starting to suggest that Microsoft may be scrapping the idea of Scorpio in general and maybe refocusing their development onto a whole new console altogether.
Interesting. Well, I would just think with this information now of the boost mode on the PS4 Pro that Microsoft would think, well, wow, if Sony had this card they were playing underneath the table. They had no idea, what other untapped potential is there on the PS4 Pro.
I don't know if they'd say, oh, wow. They'd probably say, oh, shit.
Yeah, oh, shit. Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's another reason that a lot of people are starting to speculate that the Scorpio might be a whole new console because NPD just released sales numbers for each of the consoles, and the PS4 just hit 55 million units, which is really impressive.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah, compared to the Xbox One, which just hit around 26 million. So the PS4 is outselling the Xbox One by more than a 2-to-1 ratio.
Yeah.
And then if you think about the Scorpio and essentially what the Scorpio would do, if it is what Microsoft is advertising, is it would further limit the demographic that developers are hitting for these systems, because it essentially would be an Xbox One, since every Xbox game would have to be compatible with the Scorpio. it would essentially be an Xbox One that's more expensive and more powerful. So that would be a very limiting demographic, and it's hard to pull off that type of a new piece of hardware when they're already losing the console war by such a large margin. So I think that's where the
it's a risky investment.
Yes,
to spend that much research and development on a new console when you're already getting your ass kicked,
losing the war.
Right.
So I think that the smart move would be to essentially reanalyze how they're going to market Xbox as a brand, and I do think that they should start the next generation early and start changing their image as soon as they can.
We were watching like me and Nick were watching top games coming out for 2017, and it's hard not to notice that majority of them are coming out solely for the PlayStation 4.
Precisely.
Yeah, and just for transparency, Nick is the Nintendo guy, Josh is the Xbox guy, and I'm more of the PlayStation guy. But all of us like games cross-platform.
Yeah, we don't hold any bias.
We're not fanboys by any means,
right?
If you can entertain me, I'll play you. I don't give a shit what it is.
Exactly.
But Josh actually just asked me a week or two ago, what would be my unbiased take on how each system looks. And truthfully, especially with some recent cancellations on the Xbox, they canceled a game called Phantom Dust that was on the way. Crackdown 3 was announced almost 3 years ago, and we haven't heard any word of it in over a year. There's another game called Scalebound that was just canceled that was like a huge budget game that was supposed to be very big. It doesn't bode well for Xbox exclusives. The only Xbox announced exclusives left are Forza. I mean, you can assume that Halo is coming, but there really isn't much out there, and it's concerning.
Not like an exclusive that isn't always made every year. You can't include like the Assassin's Creed games because they're made every year, or Halo. You can't even include that because it's just like stuff it's automatically going to come out. So there's no unique exclusive game coming to the Xbox.
New IPs.
Yeah, I mean the game that Microsoft is really harping on and kind of promoting as a system seller. They're even bundling it with their new Xbox One S's. Is Halo Wars 2, which I'm not saying Halo Wars 2 is a bad game, but it's a real-time strategy game. It's not going to have the same appeal as a mainline Halo or an Uncharted 4 on PS4 or a Last of Us. So if that's the game they're banking on as their big game of the year, it's just kind of a troubling direction. So
I think an interesting thing is like a lot of these games you see coming out for Xbox, they're giving you free trials on them. Like for example, that Halo 4, like the new. Was it Halo Wars game come out? You can play it for free. They're trying to go the PC route of having a free test before you buy it.
Well, that's a good point. Is we have to remember that Microsoft has the Windows experience, the PC experience. So it's not like Xbox is not doing that well. Microsoft is just going to exit the business. They have their Windows game mode. Do you? Where they're
crossplay
or
something along those lines. Xbox Play Anywhere, Xbox Anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So that is a selling point.
And what is Xbox Anywhere exactly, Nick?
Isn't that you probably know more?
Yeah, it's essentially just any game, any first party game that you buy on Xbox, you can also automatically have a free copy on PC. So. Between that and then Scorpio, depending on how it turns out, I think it's pretty clear that Microsoft is starting to focus on Xbox as a platform rather than a piece of hardware. So if you buy an Xbox game, you can play it on PC. Maybe they'll introduce a streaming option. Then you can also play it on your Xbox console. You can play it on your Elite Scorpio console. So that's kind of the direction they seem to be going. And they also have said that they're moving forward with kind of an iterative console roadmap, meaning they're going to be eliminating the concept of console generations. So how we went from Xbox, which was a generation, over to Xbox 360, which was a generation, over to Xbox One. Now it's going to be Xbox as a platform, and it'll be almost like a smartphone type of roadmap where the next year a new Xbox is going to come out that runs your games a little better, that has some more effects, that runs at a higher resolution, that runs at a more stable frame rate. All the games will still run on last year's Xbox, but it won't be quite as pretty, won't be quite as good, won't be quite as fast. And then the following year a new console will come out, so on and so forth, whereas you can always play your games on Xbox, but it's more about upgrading your experience. Just for the record, Sony has stated they plan to continue going the console generation route, even with their PS4 Pro coming out. So it's kind of two different design philosophies, and we'll see what works out.
Yeah, Time will tell on the clear leader.
I think a big problem with Xbox too is like they give you no incentive to actually go out and buy early or pick it up early, because it's like you pick up an Xbox One when it comes out, it's like super expensive and you're paying a lot of money, right? And or like, for example, if you had a previous game, like if you just wait, it just drops in price. So there's no incentive to actually go out there and get it when it comes out. When you come look at a PS4 game, it's like there is an incentive because that's the only thing you can go and get, because like it's the only like system you can play it on. I mean, like I don't know, I just like there's no incentives. So, like they don't look at their customers, that they're actually buying their product and say, hey, how can we make our customers a repeat customer? They don't do anything like that. It's like they want you to give them their money, and they don't think about you. And I don't know. I just think that's bad business.
If you have the option to play you buy one game and you have the option to play that game on PC or Xbox, why would I own both? Why wouldn't I just own the PC and then just be happy that way? There's no, I guess from a business standpoint, there is no incentive to go out and purchase that Xbox when I can play have the same experience on the PC, and probably would be a better experience.
Yeah, I feel like it kind of muddles the whole incentive to buy into their hardware. I mean, anybody who already has a PC can already play Xbox games now, is essentially what they're telling you. Now, me, and I'm sure Nick as well, as an avid PC gamer, I was really happy to hear this type of news, but I don't really, I guess, understand the move from a marketing or financial standpoint, because it's not going to get anybody to buy more Xboxes. If anything, it's going to take away reasons to buy an Xbox. Now, you could argue that you're opening up a demographic, so you're looking at higher software sales, which is maybe the direction that they were thinking, especially with the slow sales of the Xbox One.
And that's important.
But I guess time will tell that whether or not it'll be worth it in the long run. We'll have to see, I guess, what happens.
So basically what we're saying is, Microsoft, we know that you're going to listen to this podcast. There's just something deep inside of us.
And that you suck. No.
Yeah, no. And so basically we're saying is just drop everything and just make Windows. Vista. Just go back to Vista.
We need Vista 2.
Vista 2, yeah. That's what we want. We want a successor to Vista 2.
How many times does the world have to ask you for
Vista
2?
I'm just saying you suck.
Yeah.
And that's probably not a good thing that the big Xbox owner here is the harshest on Microsoft.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I feel like I get no like appreciation for being a loyal customer. I don't,
It's time to make the switch.
Yes, exactly. We will be talking about that phrase in a second.
So I just want to touch quickly on, January is traditionally the worst time of the year for movies. This is when all the crappy, low-budget failure of films come out in the year. And it seems that 2017 is no different. The two big films that came out this year, or this week, I should say, are The Space Between Us, which is a movie starring, let me see if I can find his name here. It's a movie starring Asa Butterfield, and he was in Hugo. A lot of people had assumed that he was going to have a very big career after Hugo. He was in a handful of decent films. He was in Ender's Game, which I don't know if that's a decent film.
No,
but
it's not.
The book is good.
Anyway, yes, the book was great. The author is an asshole. He's hugely against LGBT rights. Anyway, yeah, so after Hugo, his career really went nowhere, and it led to this, which is essentially about a kid who grew up on Mars, and then he came back, and he had a pen pal when he was on Mars with this girl who he had like a crush on, and he came back, and of course they fall in love, and he has no filter because he doesn't have like normal social skills, so he just tells her how beautiful she is, and they pretty much turn what could be a thought-provoking sci-fi film into a really bad version of like Twilight or like a teenage romantic comedy.
Well, Yeah,
Or,
is that who that movie is directed towards? Is that age group?
I don't think the movie knows what it's directed towards.
I don't want to be this creepy 30-year-old guy looking at this guy and this girl and be like, yeah.
With like a bucket of popcorn in your lap in the
Right,
back corner. of
right,
the-
like, oh, it's so
When you-
buttery.
When you describe that movie, the first movie that comes to my mind is the movie Pearl Harbor. You know, it's like where they make a basically they exploit a national tragedy to make it into a love story. Between,
Right, exactly.
So anyway, that was my initial impression after seeing the trailer, and it seems so far that my initial impression was correct, as the movie is sitting at 18% on Rotten Tomatoes. USA Today said, the whole sci-fi narrative collapses into a mess of illogical story beats and groan-inducing quasi-tragic bits right out of love story. AV Club says it's the kind of processed cheese tearjerker completely devoid of shame that can harden even the easiest criers and the heckling cynics. You want to take its lunch money or at least introduce it to better music. So that seems like it's going to be a pass. Josh will probably end up watching it.
And Josh will end up coming to my house and making me watch it.
The second one, which is somehow even more disappointing, is a sequel to a remake that came out, I think, in 2002, called The Ring. Originally Ringu in Japan. The Ring is considered by many to be a kind of a cult classic in horror. It's pretty widely regarded to be a pretty good horror film. Rings is not that. Rings...
another Naomi Watts film, by the way. The Ring, by the way.
Yes, The Ring and The Ring 2 did have Naomi Watts. Rings does not.
The reason not to see it.
Rings is sitting at 5% on Rotten Tomatoes after 55 reviews. That's from professional critics. I've read around the internet word from those who have actually watched it as normal moviegoers, and the consensus is it's a giant fucking piece of shit. It's terrible. I watched the trailer too. It looked terrible in the trailer. The acting is supposed to be laughably bad. The good news that's come out of this is it seems to be one of those great movies that are so bad that they're good, in the way that you can get a little drunk and watch it with some friends.
Well, I guess I'll be watching that later.
Yeah, exactly. Just some words from some professional reviews. Blu-ray.com just says it's an entirely useless film.
Wow.
And WeLive.com, which I thought was a really interesting review, said that what is The Ring when nobody uses VHS anymore and instead watches all their videos online? Rings does not explore that. Instead, it just rehashes The Ring, but uses copied video files instead of tapes. So, if there was any type of appeal that a movie based on The Ring nowadays could have, it would be the idea that YouTube is prominent, that the viral video is prominent, and that everybody could die from the girl in the ring very quickly because of the concept of viral videos. Apparently, this movie doesn't address that at all, which is crazy. It has no feel for the pulse of our current culture. So it's supposed to be terrible. I'll probably watch it.
Of course. I remember when that movie came out. 2002.
I'm actually watching the trailer to that, and I love the reaction of people when they see this girl on the TV. The reaction is not to leave the room. The reaction is, I gotta tear every piece of electronics off the wall. Why don't you just go leave? Why don't you just go outside?
It's where there are no electronics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the underlying message. Get out, go outside.
I'm not sure if you guys have any other topics to talk about.
I would like to bring up the Switch, Nintendo Switch, because I feel like that is the most important thing that everybody should be thinking about right now in 2017.
Switch.
Switch, yeah. Yeah, so are we going to see a resurgence of the Nintendo dynasty? I just read on WCCF Tech that there are currently over 100 titles in development for the Switch. That's a big deal, considering we've had the generation of the Wii U, where it's basically all been Nintendo keeping the system afloat.
And shovelware.
And shovelware, exactly. So the article from WCCF Tech talks about how Nintendo's president confirmed that there were over 100 games in development from 70 publishers. So that's a little reassuring considering the past. and there have been a lot of pre-orders. I think they've almost, well, maybe I don't know if they've sold out of pre-orders.
Oh yeah, they're sold out everywhere, and they have been since day one.
Right. So
actually, Best Buy briefly had pre-orders available on Friday, I think, and they were available for about 25 minutes, and they were gone again.
Right. So that has to make everybody that pre-ordered one of the Switches very, very happy to see, because this console needs to succeed.
Well, it's always had couldn't you say Nintendo's always had like that niche group of people that want to buy it? I mean, a lot of people, when you ask them what's the first video game system they played, it was a Nintendo. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And there's always been that argument, you know. This is the generation where Nintendo goes under. Well, they've proven us wrong time and time again. So.
I will say that this does seem to be. I'll put it this way: it wouldn't surprise me if this was the last shot that Nintendo took. I think that if the Switch does sell as poorly as the Wii U, the investors might just lose faith, and at that point, they may just turn to third-party development because they have no other option. Whether or not that'll happen, I don't know, but I do think that the Switch has really done essentially everything right, with the exception of the actual
games.
Well, the actual first presentation.
Right. Oh, yes.
They got a lot of things wrong there. I think they made a mistake by focusing first on the party games, the Wii-style games, that they're still trying to, I think, really hang on to, because the Wii was such an unprecedented success that they're trying to cling to that success. And I think that the marketplace is a different marketplace than it was when the Wii came out. And I don't know if party games really are going to catch on the way that they used to. And I think the Wii is a good example of that. And I think another good example that Nick and I actually just happened to be speaking about earlier was the Guitar Hero series. You see that Guitar Hero was an absolute phenomenon in 2005. They were at every college party that you could find. I believe Activision develops that game, but they re-released Guitar Hero last year, and it bombed. I don't think people are interested in... Unfortunately, because I think there is an appeal personally, but I don't think people are interested in gathering around at a house, having a party, and playing together that way anymore. Mm-hmm. With that said, I think that's the only misstep Nintendo's had thus far. I think when you compare the marketing of the Wii U, which I remember that premiere video for the Wii U,
yeah.
I actually saw a funny video analyzing it, where in that 2.5-minute video, they must have said new controller about 30 times. So essentially they were promoting the Wii U accidentally as essentially just a new controller for the Wii, which it wasn't at all. It was a brand new system, but they called it a Wii U. They even made the system look just like the Wii. They did all the marketing around the controller, which, as it ended up, almost no games actually took advantage of the second screen on the controller.
Most games just replicated what you saw on the TV.
Yes.
And gave you the option not to play on the TV.
And beyond that...
Which is cool.
Yes, and that's and it's really, I think they took the next step from a technology standpoint with the Switch. I mean, it's a similar idea from that point of view, that you can have a second screen.
I think it's a convergence of the Wii U and the Wii.
And the 3DS.
And the 3DS, yeah. And Jason and I talked about this. You know, is this kind of a hidden motive for Nintendo to converge their home console with their mobile console? It's considering their financial duress over the years, up and down, and their failure with the Wii U. Is this a way to, you know, to converge those two ideas and to save money in the process? I don't know. There was just recently a rumor that Nintendo had a successor to the 3DS in the works, but that rumor failed, or actually was debunked, so we don't know.
This might be it.
This might be it, yeah.
Now, I know Reggie Fils-Aimé, I believe is how you pronounce his name, has stated several times, as well as other Nintendo representatives, that they have no intentions to phase out the 3DS, which may be true, but at the same time, I think people are putting a little bit too much weight onto that statement, because no company's ever going to say that they're phasing out a piece of hardware. Right now, the 3DS is the only piece of hardware that's making Nintendo any money.
Yeah, I just read about that. Their year-over-year sales were actually up 10% for the 3DS. So Nintendo actually was in the green last year because of the 3DS.
So, of course, they're not going to say that they're phasing out, but I can practically guarantee you that if the Switch sees sales numbers anywhere close to a PS4 numbers or even Xbox One numbers, they're going to change their tune about it, and the Switch is going to be the console that they're going to move forward with. And I think that's for multiple reasons, and I think a big reason is that it's really appealing to publishers because they only need to create one copy of a game. They don't need to create a console version for the home and then a separate mobile version for the road. So
you look at development costs.
Yes.
To make a game for the Xbox or the PlayStation, I mean, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. So if that gives the developer the opportunity to cut their cost literally in half, why not take that option?
I think it's important too that the fact that when they're bringing the system out, that they're advertising games that they know people are going to want to play. I think it's powerful to put a game that has buying. Like, people want to buy it, bringing Zelda out. People have played that game for a long
decades.
Time. Yeah, and so that's a game people are going to want to buy the system to play it on. Or Mario, for example. And it makes me wonder, too, because you're bringing up the Nintendo aspect. If they fail at this, is that going to lead to the fact that you're going to have two companies bidding over the rights for those two games, because those are going to be huge sellers for whatever system they go on to?
I don't want to live in that world.
Yeah, that's very true. If Nintendo ceases to make their own hardware, that'd be one thing. It's I don't think that's what I want to see either. But I would hope that they ever do, if they ever do, that they'll just be a third-party developer. I'd hate to see them exclusive to either platform.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's the life we're living in. It's like, something like a PlayStation, they can market exclusive, cool-looking games, but like a system like Nintendo and Xbox have to market games that they know people are going to want to play. They have to go for those big-selling games like like Halo or, for example, Mario. People are gonna, no matter who they are going to want to play those because they have some type of personal connection. They played them in the past, so. That's just my 2 cents.
But besides the point, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild looks phenomenal.
Yes.
I mean, an open world.
Say that one more time.
Looks phenomenal.
I really think that this is the Zelda game that we all dreamed about when we were children.
Right, open world.
When you play the original Legend of Zelda, and I think this was on purpose, even the original cover of Legend of Zelda showed Link at the edge of a cliff overlooking a huge, beautiful vista with a mountain in the background. And that's practically the opening scene of Breath of the Wild. Mm-hmm. So I think they're keying in on that, and they understand that the original concept of Zelda was it was an open world game. You could explore anywhere. Mm-hmm. You could go into any building. You could go into caves. You could explore all of the lands. And I think the idea of Breath of the Wild is essentially bringing that original vision into 3D now that they finally have the hardware that's capable of doing it.
Yeah, Shigeru Miyamoto actually said that in an interview. He talked about that's always been a goal of Nintendo's and his to make Legend of Zelda more open world, more expanse, wherever you see you can go. Now you might not be able to completely get to that point because you don't have the bow or the boomerang or whatever, but at least you know that you can do that. So that's huge.
Yeah, and I think the direction that Zelda games have been going for some time have been a little bit more closed off. You look at Skyward Sword, you look at...
I could not beat that game.
Yeah, that game got great reviews when it first came out, but...
The controls ruined it for me.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
It was...
Do you mean you couldn't beat it, or you just didn't want to beat it?
I could beat the game, but I was frustrated by the controls.
I mean, I'll admit it. I could not beat Devil May Cry 4 when it came out. I actually had to have somebody help me.
You physically
could not beat it.
Great. We're going to lose podcast listeners now because that guy can't do that.
Yeah,
come on.
He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. But I remember back in the day, I had a friend who couldn't beat Metal Gear Solid 2, I think, during the torture scene.
That's 1.
1?
Yeah.
Where you had to jam buttons really fast, and they were playing on the hardest mode. And, I got through.
That was hard, even on normal mode.
Yeah, so I hear you there.
Yeah. But no, Skyward Sword, every time you pick up an item, it would tell you what the item was. Every single time. It's like, I know what I'm picking up a bug. It's like, just don't bring up that icon. So it really affected how you felt in the game. You were constantly annoyed by pop-ups. It's like your phone going off next to you when you're trying to play a game, and he's like, "Shut up, leave me alone! I'm trying to play here." So yeah, that did not help the experience and became very, very annoying. But otherwise, besides that, the music was phenomenal in that game. The storytelling was actually pretty good. So, and I can see some of those bits and pieces being ushered in with Breath of the Wild, which makes me extremely excited. I think the storytelling is going to be the best we've ever seen out of Legend of Zelda, because Skyward Sword was probably the best storytelling that I've seen in that series. So Breath of the Wild should take it a step further.
And I think you could argue that between Skyward Sword and Twilight Princess, Nintendo kind of got into a little bit of a comfortability with the Zelda series. They knew what their consumers expected out of a Zelda game, and they delivered, and they were solid games. These are games that got 9+ scores across the board. But I think that they kind of stopped innovating a little bit, and I think they pushed that innovation towards the Wiimote and the functionality of that controller with Skyward Sword, and maybe backed off a little bit on the actual scope and gameplay. And what's interesting about Breath of the Wild is they actually significantly expanded their development team for this game. They brought in outsiders, they brought in just fans of the series, and they wanted to really modernize it and make it on par with open world games that are already out.
They brought developers in that worked exclusively on a 3DS too, so they knew they needed a system seller. Obviously, when you look at the lineup of the Switch, it's not good. We'll just get that out there.
Yeah, it's not good.
It's not very good. I mean, what do we have? We have Breath of the Wild.
Mario Kart Deluxe, which is already on the Wii U in a way.
Right.
You've got ARMS.
ARMS, yeah. And I don't think those games are coming out day one.
No, day one? Day one you have nothing. Day one you have Zelda. You've got Bomberman. You've got Zelda.
Which might be number 2 on the list to get.
And frankly, beyond that, you have indie level games. I think there's only like 5 launch games.
Mm-hmm. So what is you guys' overall excitement on Bomberman? I like Bomberman. I can remember that game.
I like Bomberman as much as the next guy, but it's not going to be a system seller.
No.
It's not a game that a whole lot of people are going to be all that excited about at launch.
Yeah. And it's almost a little unfortunate. Well, maybe it is fortunate that there are not a lot of launch titles, because developers have to think, well, gee, if I'm going to launch my game along Breath of the Wild, that might potentially take away some sales from their games and attention that they may well deserve. Bomberman could be an amazing game that no one plays because of Legend of Zelda. So I can understand why.
In defense of Nintendo, and I'm only speaking on Xbox. Xbox did not have a lot of games when it first started.
Exactly.
And neither did PlayStation. But the Switch is a unique situation. It's one of the worst launch lineups, I think, in the history of consoles. The only one that I can top it is probably N64, which actually only launched with 2 games. One of those being Super Mario 64. I don't even remember what the other one is. So Nintendo's kind of had a history of some poor launches. The 3DS, or I don't know if it was the DS or the 3DS, but one of those had a terrible launch lineup too. Which is funny because actually the Wii U had a huge launch lineup. It had like 30 games at launch, but none of them were very good. I think it came bundled with the Wonderful 101, which was subpar. And I think the issue with the Wii U, in addition to the marketing and people really not realizing what it was, is all of their main titles, the Mario titles, the Zelda titles, were either remakes or weird spin-offs. So you had a remake of Wind Waker. You didn't have an original Zelda on the Wii U. You had Super Mario 3D World, which was a new game, but it wasn't a new game in the same way that Super Mario 64 was a new game, or the way that Super Mario Galaxy was a new game. It was kind of a spin on 2D Mario, but kind of in a 3D plane. So
that doesn't make the game bad.
No, and I think it was a great game, but I think it doesn't make it the system seller the way, for example, a Super Mario Odyssey is going to be. Yeah. You look at Odyssey, and that's returning to form the 3D platforming elements of Super Mario 64 and Super Mario Sunshine. It's an open world platforming game where you go to different hubs and you get different things done, and it looks like a true full Mario game. And the way that I think Super Mario 3D World didn't.
Did it have a lot of party games too? I mean, I always think the Wii or Nintendo always put out all those party games.
Well, I think that's another mistake that Nintendo made with the Wii U, is that they really wanted to piggyback on the success of the Wii, which is why they called it the Wii U. It should have never been called the Wii U. It should have been called the Nintendo something to further differentiate itself as a new console.
Nintendo something.
Yes.
Something that's not the Wii.
So again, I think signs have pointed to time and time again that this party game explosion has really tapered off, and it's not what it used to be. And I don't think that's what Nintendo should bank off of anymore.
I think it was overrated too. But like,
Well, yeah,
it never worked the way it should have.
No.
Yeah, you have these party games that are just pick up, play for a little bit. Well, people have their phones in their pockets where they can just pick up a game, play for a little bit. And some of those games you play with
If
other
you want to
people.
play a bowling game, I mean, just go bowling. I don't know, it just seems weird.
Yeah, I would
that's
agree
true.
with you there. So, just to go further on how the Switch is different from the Wii U, I think it's completely different from top to bottom. You look at the build quality of the Wii U, that thing feels like a Fisher-Price toy. I feel like I could put that thing under my knee and break it in half. No problem. Whereas the Switch, obviously I haven't had it in my hands yet, but judging by trailers, and I've read a ton of hands-on impressions, it feels like an impressive adult piece of hardware. It's really well built. It's got a weight to it. The screen is really impressive. It's got a glass cover on the screen. All the hardware is really impressive. And then you mix that with the marketing that is just way better. Again, going back to the Wii U trailer, when they first unveiled it, the general impression was that it was an accessory or an extra controller. Within 10 seconds of seeing the Nintendo Switch trailer, you knew exactly what the system was all about. And that is, you have a home console that you can play with a controller at home, and at any moment you can pick it up and you can take it to go. It's a home console and a mobile console in one, and they did perfect marketing immediately to showcase that. And I think it's a huge difference from the Wii U, and I think that's why Nintendo is going to find some success. I also think that they really took a risk in changing the way that they unveiled this console, and they've done it in a way that hasn't ever been done, as far as I know, in that they only announced the Switch officially in late October of 2016, and it's due out March 3rd. So that's like a 4 or 5 month window.
It's insane.
And even when they unveiled it, they didn't say the games that were on it. They didn't say the price it was going to be sold at. They didn't give the release date. They didn't give the specs. You knew nothing about it other than that it existed and the general concept of what it was. They didn't unveil the games and the specs and the launch date until late January.
Yeah, late
So we're talking
January.
6 weeks away from the actual
Yeah.
launch of the system.
That might have something to do with... I think it was genius. That might have something to do with not having negative bias built up against the console right away.
Right. And I think, the way hype works, and I think especially in our current culture and how we're all about instant gratification and, the smartphone age and everything, they're kind of copying that smartphone model where it's announced and within a month or two, it's out. Mm-hmm. And you see Sony kind of tried to do that with the PS4 Pro as well, where they officially showcased it and it was out within 6 weeks. And I think that's the direction everything's going. I think the age of a console getting announced 2 years in advance, and then you have an E3 where you get to see it some more, and then you wait a year, and then you get to see some games. I think that's over. I think people lose interest way too quickly nowadays.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's another mistake that actually Microsoft is making with the Scorpio, and that they announced it at last year's E3, and it's going to be a year and a half.
And nobody's talking about it.
Yeah, and it's hype's dying.
Scorpio what?
I think you can add to the fact too, like if you wait longer, there's a more tendency for people to kind of like embellish things about it. I mean, you think about like games that were like shown on the systems that released like a year later, they were never what they were shown.
You're just going to create disappointment.
But my question, I actually add to this, for the people that don't know about the Switch, I'm sure there's not very many, but how much is it pricing for? I don't even know.
It's priced at $299. I think the general consensus on that has been, that's fine. I think a lot of people would have loved to see $250 or even $200, but I just don't think it was reasonable to have a fully fledged console, that could keep up with other consoles in a tablet form factor at a $299 price. If you wanted faster specs, you're going to end up paying way more than I think the general public would ever want to pay. What I've seen is that folks who are into gaming, folks who are in the industry, are a little bit more hesitant with the pricing, whereas just families, moms and dads on Facebook seem to be much more responsive to it, because I think you look at a $299 price point, and that's definitely in the ballpark of any console that's launching that's new. Mm-hmm. So I think the Wii was the only exception to that, the original Wii, in that it launched at $199, I believe. $249 maybe?
Yeah, I think it was $249.
And I think that definitely lent to why it was such a craze. And I'm sure Nintendo would have loved to do that, but I I just don't think that they were going to be able to make money selling the console at that price.
And that, or they would have made a sacrifice from an engineering standpoint.
Yeah, talking battery life or speed or...
Well, you can plug the Switch into your TV, but it's going to take 6 cables and 10 minutes. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, obviously I'm exaggerating.
It's going to take a robot.
So I'm fine with the price. And they've also made comments that, there's no bundled game either, and
that could change.
That will change over time as that happens. Now you look at the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One nowadays, you can't buy the consoles without a game bundle.
Yeah,
right.
It's all part of it. And the same thing will happen with Nintendo. I would expect to see probably their first bundle probably be a Super Mario Odyssey bundle. Probably keep the price at $2.99 and bundle Mario with it during the holiday season, which I think would be a great marketing move.
Yeah, that'd be excellent.
Which another, like when you bring that up, it upsets me too, thinking about people that actually went out and bought a PS4 and an Xbox when they first came out. Like, did we get games when it came out? No, now they're bundling everything. It's all for the new person. It's like,
yeah.
But on the flip side, those games constantly need updates.
Well,
you gotta buy DLC for $50, and
I'm just saying, acknowledge your base customer, the people that actually want to go out and buy. I just think that they need to do that more often. I think that too many times the customer gets ignored for actually showing love towards PlayStation or Xbox. I mean, like, it bothers me that they don't do anything to
reward supporters, right?
Exactly. I mean, when you bought your PlayStation, did you get a game with it when you first came out?
No.
Exactly. I mean, but now it's all for the people that buy it now. It's like, well, show us some love for actually supporting your system.
For being there on day one. Exactly.
Give me a reason to come back, is what I was saying. Give me a reason to rebuy this system. I mean, it's just me.
No, I think that's a sound argument. I also think you could argue, I think you have a solid point, but I think you could also argue that as an early adopter, you just kind of have to accept that the game library is not going to be as good. You're going to pay more for the system. You're not going to get the good deals. And I think you're right that probably shouldn't be the way it is, because I feel like early adopters should be rewarded by companies that they show support for their company. But I've been an early adopter all my life with computer hardware and consoles, and I've just kind of gotten used to the idea that I'm going to buy a console. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be really neat technologically, and there's not going to be any games to play on it for about 8 months. That's just how it is. So
that's the sacrifice you made.
Yeah. So if you're willing to pay $50 more with no game bundled, and you're not going to have a whole lot to play with it, at least to be able to experience the new technology and just all that type of stuff.
But don't you think that people that could catch on? I mean, that could really affect these companies. If people start saying, "Well, what's the point of buying it now?" For even with the Switch coming out, people say, "Well, why would I buy it now when I could buy it 6 months from now and it's going to be $100?"
Yeah, and I think that's where the hype builds in too, and that's why Nintendo's done a really good job with the hype by announcing it 6 weeks before it comes out, because people aren't going to have time to second guess that thought process. Mm-hmm. You could even argue with their NES Classic, the more sparsely available something is, the more anybody who sees that thing is just going to jump on it and buy it as a reflex because they want to get it.
You can't tell me they didn't set in a precise number that they were going to manufacture just to create that demand.
And I think it's interesting that you bring up the 6 months. That is brilliant. I mean, if you think about it, you're creating demand,
and their new Super Bowl ad looks amazing. It gets me so excited.
The marketing is so much better. It just seems cool. It feels like an iPhone ad. They finally seem to have gotten to the point where they're able to relate to the modern consumer in the ways that they never did with Wii U. Even the 3DS for a long time. They had a really weird marketing, and the games weren't there. It's refreshing to see Nintendo finally coming along and hopefully being able to understand how to sell consoles again, because they really lost it.
So Nintendo, we know that you're going to listen to this as well as Microsoft. So please deliver.
Nintendo,
please, we love you.
We have faith in you.
We know all you multi-billion-dollar companies have been waiting for years and years for 3 clueless guys in the Midwest to finally tell you how to fix your company, and we're here.
We're here for you. We're giving you
we said at the beginning this podcast was just for fun. We lied.
Yeah,
it's because we know that you've been clamoring for our input.
Yeah, exactly.
So here we are.
Exactly.
It's time to find success again.
Moving on.
So now we are going to move on to our weekly segment entitled Optimism. I hardly know him. This is where we share and discuss a positive piece of news, political or otherwise, and we decided to kind of highlight this segment each and every week to further reflect what we said about the whole idea behind the podcast and that we want to bring something positive to our listeners. So I'm going to let Nick start with what he's found for the week.
Sure. I have this right up on my computer right here. Let me just find it. This article comes from The Guardian, so a pretty well-respected news source. And...
Wait, it's not fake news?
It's, we're not going to use that here. So anyways, the reasons to be cheerful, which actually works out pretty well for this segment. A full switch to low-carbon energy is in sight. Now, I know we have the Trump administration. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the world outside, but Donald Trump is president.
What?
Yeah. Yes, and there yeah, he is. So, and that's all I have to, that's my optimism for the week. No, I can't find my article. Where's my thing?
Well, I can start reading a little bit of it. Essentially, it says...
oh, here it is. I got it.
Okay, great.
So I wrote out some bullet points from the article. So back to the Trump thing. So he's done some things these past 2 weeks that have made environmentalists a little on edge about current policies going forward.
That's putting it lightly.
I'm trying to put it trying to be completely level-headed. We have the head of the EPA who's completely against the EPA. We have the situation with the pipeline.
Wait a minute, just repeat that. So the new head of the EPA
right.
is completely against the concept of the Environmental Protection
Right.
Agency.
He's spent his entire... Scott Pruitt is his name. He spent his entire career suing the EPA and thinking that it's the worst organization ever to exist. I'm kind of paraphrasing a little bit. But yeah, so he's going to be the head of the EPA going forward. And if that sounds counterproductive, well, yeah, it kind of is. We don't know the motives behind it. We don't know... Yeah, I'm sure there's maybe money involved. Whatever. Besides the point, fact is, he will be the head of the EPA. And so there could be some changes coming down the pipeline with environmental regulation. Another interesting fact is we have the Dakota Access Pipeline that is probably going to move forward. We have the Corps of Engineers looking at property easement. So it appears that will be moving forward. And so anyways, so that's not optimistic, but this article here is optimistic and why you should be optimistic. We look at the world overall on the climate change. Yes, the U.S. microcosm doesn't look good, but the world overall is looking good. For example, solar power costs around the world fell by 15%. Another 15% in 2016.
I just wanted to jump on the fact that he has sued the EPA 3 times.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, okay. All right. So now we know. Okay. So, yes. So that's not good. Anyways, so solar power dropped another 15% in cost, meaning electricity from the sun is the cheapest form of energy production in certain places around the world, such as Chile, parts of the Middle East. I know India is really jumping on the solar power bandwagon. So essentially, a lot of these countries are leapfrogging coal power and going right to green energy.
What? We're not thinking about the coal power. We're not thinking about the coal miners.
I know. But so that's some optimism right there. China is committed to adding 40 gigawatts annually of solar panels in the next few years, which is actually going to be over half the new capacity installed in the world. And we know that China is the second leading emitter of carbon dioxide, which leads to greenhouse gases. So that is absolutely phenomenal news. It's exactly what we need to hear, and we hope that they can keep that up, and that the next year they double it by another 40 gigawatts.
And just to relate this a little bit more directly with the U.S., another positive note from an economic point of view as well as an environmental point of view is that according to independent.co.uk, the United States solar power actually employs more people than oil, coal, and gas combined.
Exactly.
So what that starts to tell you right off the bat is it would be good for our employment numbers, it would be good for our economy, and it would be good for our environment. So it's really a no-lose type situation.
It is a no-lose type situation, yeah. I mean, so we really have the Obama administration. I think they played an important role in subsidizing green energy to get the ball rolling in the industry to move towards carbon neutral energy options. So we're starting to see fruition in that sector. You know, we have the Tesla Gigafactory is open and starting to produce batteries. So that's really going to help with costs in battery manufacturing and purchase prices, which has already been decided in the industry is extremely important because we can harness the energy. We're very good at that, but we need to be able to store that energy. And thankfully, Elon Musk and Tesla are doing just that. And my last piece of optimism is the Chevy Bolt. That's going to be coming out. Yeah, we're seeing mass market electric vehicles right almost here, where anybody can buy them.
So somebody told me that like you could see it in California. There's like tons of Tesla cars on the road, so it's happening.
The problem with the Tesla Model S is it's so expensive.
Right. Yeah.
Like your
of
average.
Course, the Tesla Model 3, when it was unveiled, the pre-orders sold in record numbers. I think it was close to 2 million pre-orders already, which is unbelievable. Now, the Tesla Model 3 is Tesla's new car, battery-powered. The Tesla Model S, I think, sat right around $80,000 to $100,000 to purchase. The Tesla Model 3 is $35,000, and that's before a tax incentive of another $6,000 you can shave off of it. So it's a very reasonable price for a new car. And, of course, once you purchase it, you don't have to worry about gas at all.
Right.
You have to worry about charging at home. So if you're on a coal-based power grid, you'll still have an energy cost associated. But from what I've read, the fuel economy, if you're charging it that way, is still right around 90 miles per gallon. So it's amazing. That, and there's free charging stations all across the U.S. For Tesla where you can charge your cars. It takes about 20 minutes, and there's no cost involved. That's right now. From what I understand, in the future that will change. There will be a cost involved, but even then it'll be very minimal.
But people already pay for gasoline, so really it's a matter of we need to subsidize that portion of the market to get people onto this new technology. So it's very important, and I see it as very optimistic. I'm making my uneducated guesstimate that we're going to see solar or electric cars predominantly on the road within the next 10 years.
You know, and to go on with what Nick said is, I just pulled this thing up here. Like last Sunday, I was watching that they are developing these ice energy, where it basically goes along with wind power and solar panel, and it allows you to basically store up energy. So like when the wind power and our solar power aren't the most economical because of weather, this allows us to harness that energy that is already stored and like reuse it. And it's just basically an ice cube that freezes, and then as it unfreezes, you use the energy from that ice cube.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's the way of the future. And I'm like, I don't like, I mean, bringing up the coal thing, people always say, oh, what about the coal mine? Well, it's like we should be trying to get people out of industries that are damaging. You know, it's just like, we can reallocate people to different jobs that would help the country. So that's always a positive thing.
Yeah, I mean, all these politicians and multi-billionaire CEOs are so concerned about the poor middle-class employees from the coal industry, but you don't hear anybody in the upper echelons complaining about automation and what that's going to do to change our employment. And you look at McDonald's workers where it's all automated computers. You look at Amazon Go, where it's essentially a grocery store that's unmanned by any human being. Automation... if you want to talk about what's going to affect our employment rates, automation is what we need to be talking about. That's where we're going to lose a lot of employment, from cab drivers with self-driving cars, from fast food employees at places like McDonald's or grocery store employees. Automation is going to change our entire economic landscape over the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to happen more quickly than people think. So when you talk about how the issues lie within coal and the employees you can lose there, you could also argue that, just as the article I shared stated, you can essentially move all those coal employees over to the solar industry. Creating a solar infrastructure is going to bring in a ton of jobs as well. in a way that automation isn't.
Yeah, if we spend heavily in R&D in the solar and wind movement, the U.S. could be the leader of the world in terms of that technology, and we would control that we can control the market, and the jobs would follow.
And you said we should be. When we'd like to come around and say that we are the best country in the world. Well, we should be the best country in the world. And
lead
actually,
by example.
Exactly, we should own up to our own words. I mean, there shouldn't be a reason why more other countries outside of this country that dominate us on multiple facets.
So optimism,
Exactly.
green energy is here.
So that's our optimistic story of the week. We're going to move on here. The next segment I'm going to talk about is I'm going to be talking about movies and movies that I've watched and how they relate to us in the real world. I just recently rewatched the Matrix trilogy, which, unbelievably, the original Matrix came out in 1999, which is exactly 18 years ago.
Makes me feel so old.
So that means you could legally have sex with somebody that was born when the Matrix came out. So that's kind of terrifying.
Oh my god.
Just as a brief review of the films, I thought the first is an all-time classic. And I thought it couldn't have aged any better. The cinematography, the acting, the special effects, which have dated a little bit, but they've used them sparingly enough that they actually work really well. And then just the entire concept of the film, which is essentially human beings are trapped into a digital world where they're all plugged in and they're being used for their energy source, and they're essentially living in an illusion. Is first of all really ingenious of an idea. It was an amazing concept at the time, and this is just when computers were first starting to catch on, so they were way ahead of their time that way. But also, it's very relevant today, and I'll touch on that in a minute after my review. So the first one I think is just fantastic. I could watch it time and time again. The second and the third, not so good. But when the second and third first came out, they actually weren't that greatly reviewed either. But I was definitely a defender at the time, saying that they were just as good as the first and they're amazing. Rewatching them now, as I'm a little older and a little wiser and a little more cynical, I have found that they're definitely not as good as the first. There's some really ham-fisted romance that's really pushed in, the love between Trinity and Neo. That's just kind of awkward and forced, and
anything with Keanu Reeves is forced.
and unrealistic and just cheesy. There's a lot of cheesiness in the second and third movies. But as I watch through them, they still have action scenes and fight scenes that are unmatched today. I think the highway chase scene in The Matrix Reloaded has yet to be topped. It is the greatest highway chase scene ever put on film. So I will give it credit for that. And I think the overarching plot is actually pretty solid too, in that at the end of The Matrix, Neo destroys Agent Smith, and essentially Agent Smith, through being destroyed, no longer serves a purpose in The Matrix, so The Matrix lined him up to be deleted out of the system, and something happened and triggered in him where he fought so he wouldn't be deleted, and it made him this weird entity that still existed in the Matrix that wasn't plugged in, and essentially what he turned into was a virus. So in The Matrix Reloaded,
Sounds like the presidential election.
Smith can penetrate anybody he wants.
That's what she said.
And essentially he makes a clone of himself, and he slowly takes over every single entity in the Matrix, similar to what a virus would do, or at least a virus could do. And really, the conclusion of the movie is Neo kind of sweeps in as like semantic antivirus and just pretty much cleans out the system, and that's the end of the movie. So I'm into IT. I understand IT, and the premises from that point of view made a lot of sense, and they were kind of interesting. It was just more of the romance and a lot of the faux religious ideologies that were touched on that just didn't really quite click and didn't really work. But with that said, the whole concept of the film, in that we're all blinded and that we're all actually living in a computer simulation, is very interesting, because many of the greatest minds on our planet today, including Elon Musk and several other tech billionaires, have theorized that we are actually living in a simulation. And not only have they theorized that it's a small possibility, Elon Musk actually believes, and he said, quote, there is a 1 in billions chance that we're not living in a computer simulation. He is completely convinced that we are. And I'll just read exactly what he said about it. He said, the strongest argument for us probably being in a simulation, I think, is the following. 40 years ago, we had Pong, 2 rectangles and a dot. That's where we were. Now, 40 years later, we have photorealistic 3D simulations with millions of people playing simultaneously, and it's getting better every year. And soon we'll have virtual reality. We'll have augmented reality. If you assume any rate of improvement at all, then the games will become indistinguishable from reality, completely indistinguishable. He said that even if the speed of those advancements dropped by 1,000, we would still be moving forward at an intense speed relative to the age of life. So what he's getting at there is things are moving so quickly, and we see in a span of 40 years how we've gone from a black screen with a white dot to virtual reality that can already almost convince us that we're there. Like, how fast is this going to move forward in that we're going to be able to convince ourselves that
it's getting faster,
that the virtual is reality,
right.
And it's moving at an unprecedented pace. So essentially what he's theorizing is a race, whether it's ours or an alien race or whatever it might be, has already reached this point several times over. And then they create a simulation, and inside that simulation, a race advances, all simulated to create another virtual reality. And then
it's
it goes
Inception,
forever
man.
and ever and ever.
So basically, what we're getting at is if somebody can discover the cheat codes to life, to what we need, what we need to do,
Send them to us.
send them to us.
Interesting little bit of information about that. That movie was selected by in 2012 to be added to the National Film Archives by the U.S. Library of Congress. So, obviously, the U.S. government...
The original Matrix?
Yeah, considers the Matrix an important
Interesting.
movie.
Yeah, for sure. And even Elon Musk actually puts it in an optimistic point of view. He essentially argues that we should hope that we're living in a civilization. He says, quote, otherwise, if civilization stops advancing, then that may be due to some calamitous event that stops civilization. He said that either we will make simulations that we can't tell apart from the real world, or civilization will cease to exist. So that seems like an extreme point of view, and I think it is an extreme point of view, especially when compared to our current mainstream thought process. But it's very interesting that one of the greatest minds on our planet, who has very much his thumb on the pulse of technology today, very, very strongly believes that we're living in a simulation right now. It's just very interesting.
Yes.
And that's my segment.
What segment are we on?
Next would be, Nick, Josh.
Josh, yeah. Sorry, podcast listeners, we're getting this. We're getting it.
Podcast.
Podcast. Because we're going to get thousands of them.
That's how we're making our money!
Yeah. So I guess since my two counterparts talked about technology, I'm going to talk about movies since that's all I really know. I spent this week watching some good movies, but I thought I'd focus on 2 of them. Well, I guess good, I say good kind of sarcastically, but the first one I wanted to talk about was the sequel to the mega hit by Tom Cruise, Jack Reacher 2.
The mega hit.
Never Go Back. Yeah, exactly. That's probably the key to the movie. You'll never go back to it.
There's no sarcasm.
I just had to point out the fact that all the bad guys in these 2 movies are I swear to God, he gets them from a factory. They all look identical. Look at these 2 guys. This is the guy that was in the first one, and this is the guy that was in the second one.
Oh my God!
It's like a factory of bad guys.
Yeah, they keep them in a room somewhere.
I was really disappointed in this movie because I tend to go to movies with certain actors. I didn't go to this movie. I tend to watch movies with certain actors and expect that if you're in a certain type in your career that you're going to see a good movie, he's going to put money behind it. If you go to a Disney movie, you expect to see a decent budget behind it, and so you expect to see Tom Cruise put some decent money behind any movie that he's in, and that just didn't happen in this movie. It was just, to sum up Jack Reacher 2 to me would be an hour and a half of watching Tom Cruise and his co-star, the girl from
How I Met Your Mother.
run around. That's basically all they did. They were just literally running from place to place.
Yeah.
Tom Cruise is really good at running in movies. I have to give him credit.
Yeah, and I will gladly pay to watch him run. It's good.
It just it was supposed to be like this action movie, but it's like it almost had this semi like they were just joking the whole time. It's like I'm
like we're eventually gonna get away. So
I'm charged with espionage. That's a joke.
Colby Smulders is her name.
Yeah, she's attractive, but I just think she's a terrible actress.
In terms of acting, yeah.
She
should stick to finding.
So, what would you give Jack Reacher? Never Go Back out of 10?
Oh, maybe a 2.
Oh wow, that bad.
Yeah, I like the first one. I mean, I thought it was funny to watch. It's the epitome of cheesy action films. But like when you go to Colby Smulders or Rosemary Pike to Colby Smulders, you could notice the difference.
Downgrade. I must also point out that that's an equally terrible and accurate title to the film, Never Go Back.
Yeah.
And I will also say that recent films seem to be on an interesting course, because I forgot to mention that the tagline of Rings was, first you watch it, then you die. So I would say 2 equally terrible and accurate titles for
So the next movie I wanted to examine was Encino Man, and I found this movie on Netflix just by pure chance. And this movie I'm going to give a strong 6. And I want to say to people, go see this movie because you will laugh your ass off. I love, my favorite scene in the movie is when the 2 main characters, Pauly Shore, because everybody knows who Pauly Shore is, well, maybe not everyone, and Sean Astin, the Samwise Gamgee, are the main characters, and they find a caveman in Sean Astin's backyard in his pool, and they unfreeze this caveman in their shed with a space heater, which I thought was the funniest scene in the movie. And the caveman is Brendan Fraser.
Yes,
sounds right.
And I guess my favorite part of the movie is the fact that instead of telling anybody that he just found an ancient caveman, they think the best idea is to enroll him in high school, which he seems to get more. He seems to get more dates.
That's
from
the
anybody.
first thing they did.
Yeah,
that's the first.
That's what I would do.
I don't know.
When did that movie come out?
1993.
So does it feel like a movie from 1993? Does it have that nostalgic charm of a 1993 film?
No, it doesn't. It seems like if you would do a bunch of heavy drugs and woke up and this was on TV, this would kind of seem what happened. It just doesn't make any sense.
I don't think you could give a more glowing endorsement than
I know. I think Pauly Shore is the most interesting character in this movie. He wasn't supposed to be in this movie, but they loved him so much they wanted to put him in this movie, so all of his lines in that movie are ad-libbed. And Pauly Shore, originally, he auditioned to be the caveman.
So they didn't have any... Wait. They didn't have any...
Yeah, his character was created after he auditioned for the film.
That is hilarious.
I'm going to have to watch that.
Yeah,
it's
on Netflix?
Yeah, it's a cheap watch if you have Netflix. I mean, $8, I guess, a month, but it's worth a watch. It's not worth spending. It's not worth spending any money. It's worth a watch.
Nice.
All right, fuck that. New movie of the week. Not Funny Games, but Encino Man.
Exactly.
Let's be honest here.
It gets the Digital Relics Podcast Worth a Watch Award.
Maybe
Wow, that was an alliteration right there.
Maybe Pauly Shore is out there listening to this.
Exactly. Yeah,
I'm sure he is, along with the rest of our society.
Microsoft, Nintendo, and Pauly Shore are listening to this.
I wanted to bring this up
together in one.
Together, yeah.
So, I wanted to bring up this last little part. Not movie related, but the fact that since we were talking about games before, I have my 2 favorite moments of my video game playing for the week, right? And so I don't know if people listening to this podcast know, but I'm a big wrestling fan, so I tend to play wrestling video games. So I had 2 of the most hilarious glitches happen to me while I was playing my wrestling video game. The first one was I was wrestling an opponent that was completely invisible, and they had a video of me shaking hands with somebody that wasn't actually there, which I thought was really funny. But the best one was when I was wrestling somebody. I had picked up a trash can in the game, right? And the guy I was wrestling like grabbed me, and the trash can was absorbed into my character. And so I had to wrestle the entire match with. My original words were retarded arms because my arms were constantly going like this. So I had to wrestle the entire match like this. And it's constantly flipping around. Because it's like it's like the character, the motion is like being conflicted with the trash can.
Yeah, so like the physics of the arms were all insane. That's great.
I know our podcast listeners can't see what he just did, but he looked like a floppy wet noodle. That was
so that's my
conjoined.
That's my endorsement of the game of the week.
Okay, our next segment is the podcast game of the week. Every week we will be playing some type of a game. It'll be different every week. This week we are playing a game that involves if you could recast the main role of any iconic character in a movie, who would you recast it with and why? And I've chosen 5 different movies, and we're going to talk about who we would recast it with. So the first movie is a movie that I spoke about earlier, and that would be The Matrix. And we're talking about the iconic role of Neo, played by Keanu Reeves.
I want to go first.
All right, Josh.
So the person I would choose to recast Neo is Will Smith.
And he had his opportunity.
That's right.
This is a true story. He was the first choice for the role of Neo, and he turned it down so he could be in Wild Wild fucking West. And another little tidbit of information, Morpheus, who was played by Lawrence Fishburne, what is his name? Sean Connery was the first choice for that role, and he turned it down to be in the League of the fucking Extraordinary Gentlemen. 2 awful movies.
Yes.
Now, Sean Connery retired after League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. That's how bad that movie was. And Will Smith's career could be argued has never recovered since Wild Wild West. He was a AAA huge star in the late 90s, and since then he's definitely dwindled down since his Men in Black Independence Day days.
I do remember him making a comment how he like selects movies just for money. I mean, Wild Wild West would probably be a good example of that.
Just like as soon as you say the name of that movie, like the song comes in my head. Like it's like
That's a remake.
Pain.
That's a remake of an older film, by the way.
I didn't know that.
So do we think Will Smith would have been good in the role? I actually think he would have been. He would have been completely different than Keanu.
Yeah, it's the feel of the movie would have been a lot different.
You know, I like Keanu Reeves, but I'll admit it, the fact he's not very charismatic, and I do think Will Smith is a lot more charismatic than he is.
See, I'd almost disagree. In that, I think Keanu Reeves is monotone. I think Keanu Reeves is not a great actor, but I think what makes him appealing is that he's very charismatic. I like him, and I like watching him in movies. I think when I watch him, you just tend to root for him, and he just seems like a good guy, and he's not a good actor, but...
Let's go, Johnny Utah!
Yeah, exactly.
Well, he's an incredible action star. I mean, I watched a video of him like going through a course, like shooting a gun and like punching stuff, and it was incredible. Like
I think also we should point out the fact that he's an incredible human being too. By the way,
He
just
is
my opinion on him as an actor is not any way entail what I think of him as a human being.
Okay, the next movie is The Dark Knight. The iconic role of the Joker, played by Heath Ledger. Does anybody want to take this one?
Yeah. I did cheat a little bit. I wrote down my answers prior to the podcast, and Jason yelled at me.
Jared Leto?
Yeah, I almost thought that for a second. No, I said a young Anthony Hopkins.
Ooh, interesting.
Oh, wow.
I think he would have been a good choice because he's got that from watching Westworld, like he's got that subtle, sinister tone that he can portray, and I think it comes off where like he's crazy, but you can't really tell, but you know he's crazy. So I think that's
actually really good. I like that a lot. I could almost see mixing his character from Westworld with Joker, and then also mixing his character from Silence of the Lambs all into one.
Yes,
and that could be a really nice combination. So you're saying like an Anthony Hopkins when he's like in his 30s or something.
Right? Yeah, yeah. You don't want like some old. Yeah, like I'm gonna
What the
get
fuck's
you.
going on?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, he's an older dude now, and so, but yeah, like Silence of the Lambs, where like he gets under your skin, and really, I mean, he's a phenomenal actor. We know that. So, yeah.
My choice would have been Kevin Spacey, by the way.
It's pretty good. I can see Kevin Spacey as the Riddler because he's really well spoken.
Right.
Yeah.
What? You could see somebody other than Jim Carrey?
It's hard, but I can. Okay, the next movie is Forrest Gump, and we're talking about the titular role of Forrest Gump, played by Tom Hanks. Does anybody have any ideas of who you would recast Tom Hanks?
You go.
Donald Trump.
He's got the right speech cadence for it.
Yeah.
Like,
Impossibly the IQ.
and the money.
Exactly.
I thought Daniel Day-Lewis.
I said that as well.
Yeah, and even as I say it, this sounds arrogant, but I almost feel like that role is below him because
I agree with that.
as good as Tom Hanks was in the role, there is no subtlety to that role. Like, he plays a caricature, essentially, of a human being. Whereas Daniel Day-Lewis, I think, thrives in subtlety. He lives in the character, he becomes them, and it's through the subtle body language and the speech cadence and the way his eyes move and everything about him that makes you convinced that he's the character. Whereas I think Forrest Gump is a lot more face value and obvious. But with that said, I think Tom Hanks was probably one of the best actors you could choose for that role. That was one of those born to play roles, I think.
When I was looking at that, when you said Forrest Gump, Tom Hanks, it was very, very hard to think of another actor that could play that role.
Yeah, like, well, you think Daniel Day-Lewis, I can't think of a guy that played Lincoln could play Forrest Gump. It's like two opposite sides of the spectrum, you know?
Mm-hmm. Or like from There Will Be Blood, you know,
Yeah.
Daniel Plainview.
Okay. And I love Tom Hanks. I think there's so many movies that Tom Hanks is in that are just really enjoyable, good movies to watch. I mean, except that movie has some semi-racist overtones, but I won't get into that.
The next movie is, Indiana Jones. Of course, we're talking about Harrison Ford. This is a hard one because I think
this was the easiest one for me.
Really, see, because I think Harrison Ford is one of the most iconic actors.
What are you gonna say, Tom Selleck or what?
Yeah. well, I guess I'm bending this a little bit. Like, if it was made now or if it was made then, is like
it doesn't matter.
I was gonna say Chris Pratt.
Yeah, and I think that's the easy and obvious answer for sure because he's an everyman, but he's really good looking, and he's charismatic, and he's funny. However, as much as I like Chris Pratt, I just think he can't touch Harrison Ford.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean.
He's not as sexy.
You summed it up very well.
I think what Chris Pratt lacks is whether it's an illusion or not, but the impression of intellect that you get out of Harrison Ford from Indiana Jones. You're convinced that he's an intelligent college professor, whereas Chris Pratt, I don't think I could ever believe that unless he really pulled it off. I really like Chris Pratt in Guardians of the Galaxy, and I liked him in Jurassic World, but I think he's a little bit more limited compared to what Harrison Ford can
It's
pull
definitely part of his package is that the ignorance that he plays off that goes with his comedy. You look at Parks and Recreation, where he played what was his name, Andy, and a little bit in Guardians of the Galaxy, where he plays like the stupid. I don't want to say stupid, but I guess that's the only word I can think of.
Goofy,
right. So I totally understand what you're getting at.
I've seen him in a couple movies, and I was never really impressed. I mean, I do like Guardians of the Galaxy. I think he's really good in that movie. But the other two movies I've seen him in was the Magnificent Seven remake, which I wasn't that impressed with. And I can't think of the other one I'm thinking about.
And Jurassic World?
Yeah,
Jurassic World,
yeah.
And that movie is just a joke of it itself. But
I liked it. I think Jurassic World is a bad movie that's really fun to watch. Like, it's clearly a bad movie. But
my choices for Indiana Jones, I was thinking about this for a while, but I think a good choice would be, personally, Michael Fassbender. That was my choice. I like him a lot. I think he can play the action role. I also think maybe, and this isn't possible now, but I also thought maybe if he was still alive, River Phoenix would have been a good choice. But he was obviously in.
Yeah, he played the young Indiana Jones, right? Yeah.
And I thought, but that's if you. But you got to obviously look at a situation where if he's going to play the role, he's going to be playing a young Indiana Jones. So, but. I mean, there's a whole ton of actors you could put into that role that could fit that role, but I don't think anybody does it as well as Harrison Ford does.
No,
So.
I'm gonna miss Harrison Ford when he's gone.
So Harrison Ford, we know you're listening.
Quit making shitty movies and start making some good ones.
Yeah.
He was in the latest Star Wars, which was pretty damn good, and he is. This is official now. They are producing another Indiana Jones film starring him right now.
Yes.
Oh, you got to admit, it was probably his idea to get written out of that movie.
And they are going the same route with Indiana Jones that they did with the new Star Wars, in that George Lucas is no longer involved.
Thank God.
So this is a Disney property the same way Star Wars is. They're bringing in modern writers, and hopefully they can go a good direction. Steven Spielberg is linked to the new Indiana Jones as well, so some good news.
Look forward to a future review on that movie.
Yes, and as we know, Steven Spielberg is listening, so
Yeah.
Are they,
counting on you, Steve.
Are they going to bring
Give me a call.
Are they going to bring
Call me later.
what's his name back for the new Indiana Jones movie?
Shia
Yeah.
LaBeouf. No, there's been no word on whether or not he'll be back. I somehow feel like he's not going to be, but who knows? So we love you, Shia. Thanks for listening.
Just do it.
Good work.
Okay, last movie from our podcast game is X-Men, the entire X-Men series, and we're talking about the role of Wolverine / Logan, played by Hugh Jackman.
So I'll take that one. I think Tom Hardy.
Oh, wow. You knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, because one reason, he's sexy as hell.
Yeah, what other reason?
And Hugh Jackman is who's equally as sexy. Hugh Jackman. They're both. Yeah, I'm at a loss of words. Tom Hardy's a phenomenal actor, and after I saw him, in Mad Max, I was just convinced. Let's go back. I would say Batman. He's in.
as Bane.
As Bane, yeah, that was.
He definitely
amazing.
has the physique for it, and he's a shorter guy. Which, actually, Hugh Jackman. If there's one critique to his role of Wolverine, is that he's too tall for it. He's 6'1" or 6'2", where Wolverine is supposed to be 5'7". He's a short little Wolverine. And I think Tom Hardy's shorter. He's got a smaller stature, but he's ripped and he's buff.
Right.
I spent hours thinking about who I would pick to replace Wolverine, and that beats any of my recommendations, so I'm not even going to say anything, because I think Tom Hardy would be perfect. I think he's one of the best actors alive today, and I think he's got the stature for it. Great pick.
Oh, come on. Tell me who you're going to pick. I'm just curious.
No.
Shia LaBeouf.
I was gonna throw. I was gonna say that I think that the guy who I think would be a good Wolverine would be the guy that was his co-star in a couple of those Wolverine films. The guy that played Sabretooth. I think he would be a good Wolverine pick. I like him a lot.
Oh yeah, what's his name?
Isn't he a wrestler or something?
No, he's.
No, but he kind of looks like. Yeah, he kind of looks like if Hugh Jackman fell down some steps.
He's busted his face up a little.
He's disabled, brother.
But he's kind of. Yeah, he's similar. I'll have to look that up.
Well, that's my choice.
Right.
Okay, so that ends our podcast game of the week. We're going to hit on one last segment, and this is something Nick's going to head up called...
Neat Knowledge Nibble. Enter sweet music here.
And this is where Nick talks about, or actually all of us will talk about, just a little tidbit of actual real-world advice that will give you some kind of immediate benefit, whether it be something simple and small or huge with a lot of impact.
Right. So
this neat knowledge nibble this week is going to be essentially fake it until you make it. So that is in context to the idea of if you're having issues with confidence, or you're having issues with anxiety, or you're shy, my advice to you would be to fake it until you make it. And by that I mean go out there and pretend you're confident. Go out there and pretend that you are comfortable and that you are outgoing. And eventually over time, with any luck, you might wake up one day and realize that you are. confident and comfortable and outgoing. I think all three of us have had issues with some social anxiety either right now or in the past. And I can say that I had it pretty bad, and that really helped me. So that is your neat knowledge nibble of the week. Any input, you guys?
I think it was great. We were trying to discuss before we started the podcast today, and that was clearly at the top of the list. So great. Thanks, guys.
Great. So we are approaching the end of our podcast. Is there any other inputs you'd like to share before we close up?
Well, I think we were successful in what we set out to achieve.
I think by the time we publish this, we will be
renowned
multi-millionaire radio stars.
I'll be hanging with Pauly Shore.
Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere high in a dumpster.
Yeah. Do we have a contact? Do we have an email? Do we have a telephone number?
I just want to say thanks for listening. This is our first episode. We plan on doing an episode once a week, and we will be publishing episodes every Monday morning, so please stay tuned. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play Music, or essentially any other popular podcast provider. To contact us, you can send us an email at thedigitalrelics@gmail.com. We would love to hear input, suggestions, really mean things is fine too. We'd love questions because we'd love to do a question and answer segment.
If there's anything you want us to talk about that relates to the realm that you just listened to, please don't be shy. Send us an email.
So thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week. Stay cheery.